Remember this picture of the ovary from chapter 28 and all the different steps of what's going on in the 28-day cycle? On day 14 is ovulation. That's where the egg is released from the ovary and it goes into the fallopian tube. Then you also have sperm deposited in the vagina. So semen would be deposited here in the vagina. The sperm have to swim up through the cervix, through the uterus, into the fallopian tube, and up to this ovulated egg. Then the sperm will find the egg and one will fertilize the egg. Once an egg is ovulated, it's only good for about 24 hours. So this has to happen shortly after ovulation. So there is only this 24-hour window in each 28-day cycle when fertilization can occur. Now, when it comes to getting pregnant, though, it's not just one day a month that sex can lead to pregnancy. The sperm can live for 3 days in the female reproductive tract. So if you have sex for 3 days before ovulation or the day of ovulation, fertilization can occur. So once an egg is fertilized, then it goes through meiosis II, so that then you get, if you look at the pictures here, there is a polar body. A fertilized egg goes through meiosis II. You get, there's your second polar body. And then you get a mature egg and a sperm. They fuse into a zygote. So a zygote is one cell that is an egg plus a sperm fused together. Now you're back to having that full 46 chromosomes because the egg had 23, the sperm had 23. Now you're at your full 46 chromosomes. And it typically takes about 10 to 20 hours for sperm to make the journey up to the egg. So this will happen several hours to the next day after sex. Then the zygote begins cell division. And this is a special type of cell division called cleavage. So you can notice the number of cells is increasing. You start with 1, then 2, then 4, then 8, and so on. So you double the number of cells. So now you do mitosis, and you make more cells. But look at the size of the cells. Their cells are not growing. So you start off with 2 large cells, then you get 4 cells that are a little smaller, 8 cells that are a little smaller. With each division, the cells get smaller. So you're making more cells, but there is no growth. This is cleavage. So you spend about 1 week traveling through the fallopian tube and doing cleavage. By the time it reaches the uterus, so right here, this blastocyst stage, which you can see is right here, when you reach the uterus, then you have about 200 cells. So a blastocyst is about 200 cells that reaches the uterus. And you can see the cells have split into 2 groups. You have a trophoblast and an embryoblast. Trophoblast is the outer cells. So there are all these kind of pinkish ones here. They will develop into the placenta. Part of the placenta is made by the mother, part is made by the embryo. This is the part of the placenta that's made by the embryo. Then you have the embryoblast. These are the cells that will become the embryo. So this is these blue cells here on the inside. That's the embryoblast. Then this blastocyst, you can see here, implants in the wall of the uterus. And it takes about a week or so to get fully implanted. So we've covered 2 weeks now from the time of fertilization until you have a fully implanted blastocyst. Once it's fully implanted, then it's called an embryo. Before this time, it can either be called pre-embryo or conceptus. So from fertilization to implantation, it's called a pre-embryo or conceptus. At this time, once implantation is complete, that's when the embryo will start to secrete HCG. So we mentioned this hormone in chapter 28. That's human chorionic gonadotropin. This hormone goes to the ovary and it keeps that corpus luteum alive. So once you have an implanted embryo, it secretes HCG. HCG keeps the corpus luteum alive, or it maintains the corpus luteum. And then the corpus luteum will continue to secrete estrogen and progesterone. And estrogen and progesterone will cause the uterus to maintain the endometrium. And as long as the uterus maintains the endometrium, you keep the embryo. And it is at this time now that the woman will notice a missed period. And that's when she could have her first clue that she's pregnant. And remember, this is 2 weeks after fertilization occurred. So until you hit that 2 weeks after fertilization, there's no way to know if you're pregnant or not. You have to wait that 2 weeks. When it comes to calculating gestation times, there's a couple of different ways to do it. Biologically, pregnancy is considered to begin when implantation occurs. And this would be 2 weeks after fertilization. And if you go by this count, pregnancy lasts 36 weeks. Doctors use a completely different system. Doctors like things they can know. Most women cannot tell you the date that fertilization occurred. So doctors start counting with the first day of the last period because most women can tell them that date. So doctors actually start counting the pregnancy 2 weeks before fertilization even occurs. So if you use this count, pregnancy is 40 weeks. If you want to count just from fertilization to birth, that time is 38 weeks. So from conception to birth is 38 weeks, but doctors add an extra 2 weeks on. They start counting from the first day of the last period and say that it's 40 weeks. Another thing that can happen during fertilization is you can get twins. Twins can be fraternal or identical. So monozygotic is identical twins. This is when you have one egg, one sperm, you get one zygote. That's why it's called monozygotic. So you have 46 chromosomes here. You get one embryo with its 46 chromosomes. Then the embryo splits. So you had 46 chromosomes here. That splits and you have the same 46 chromosomes in each of these. So you get 2 babies that are 100% genetically identical. They have the same 46 chromosomes. So these babies are going to be the same sex and they are going to look alike. Now, there can be small differences because environment matters, and they're not always necessarily the same size because one of them might be in a position in the womb where it gets more blood from the placenta than the other, And the one that's getting the better blood supply will be bigger than the one getting the less blood supply. Then you can have fraternal twins or dizygotic. So di means two. This is when the woman releases two eggs. And each egg is fertilized by a separate sperm. And so in this case, each zygote has a different 46 chromosomes. And so you get two babies born that are just like any other two siblings. They can be the same or different sex. And genetically, they don't have any more in common than siblings who were born several years apart. They just happen to be born at the same time. And then there are exceptions. So for example, with the monozygotic twins, the identical twins, it doesn't have to stop at two. That embryo can keep splitting over and over. You can get triplets, quadruplets, you can even get quintuplets. This picture is a set of 5 identical girls who were born in Canada in 1934. There was no fertility treatment, nothing going on. Just that embryo kept splitting, and you ended up with 5 babies, all with the exact same genes. And when it comes to the fraternal twins, the dizygotic, because each egg is fertilized by a different sperm, it's actually possible for the twins to have different fathers. Because remember, sperm can live 3 days inside the female reproductive tract. So if a woman has sex with 2 different men during the 3 days before she ovulates, then there would be 2 different sets of sperm there, and it's a 50-50 that each egg could be fertilized by a different man's sperm. So there's a movie in which, from the 1980s, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito are fraternal twins. And although that might sound kind of weird for humans, in the animal kingdom, in some species, that's the norm. Like cats, for example, if you've ever had a cat have kittens, you might notice that the kittens look very different from each other because it's normal for cats to have each kitten in the litter have a different father. Just helps you give more genetic diversity that way.